All right. Well, welcome to the Elevate Your Running, Uplevel Your Nutrition. Um, so I've had a lot of questions lately about nutrition for runners and athletes, and like, what does that look like when you're injured and not training, and when you're training heavy for maybe a marathon or a half marathon, and you're just logging a lot of miles. Like, what does that look like in terms of not just what you're eating before and after your run, but what you're eating during your run, what you're eating during the week, all those good things. So, I wanted to share some things that have worked for me, that have worked for my athletes. I've partnered with a sports dietitian last year, and it was a really great way to uplevel my running because I was running um, fasted most of the time, which is a big no-no. So I want to kind of dig into why. I'm going to move my notes over here. Why it's important to also fuel your body for success. So as athletes, as runners, we want to fuel our body not just for the running and not just for, running PRs, but also for life. Like, how many of us have been, for marathon training or even have a heavy half long run happening, and you get your long run in and then you feel like sluggish and fatigued and just tired for the rest of the day or maybe the rest of the weekend. Has anyone experienced that? Yeah, I have. I definitely have. And when I was training for CIM 2 years ago, I was a disaster because I wasn't feeling my body right. And every weekend felt like my long run was dictating that weekend. And then to like get the energy to do other things was really tough. So so with that, there are, three different components, right? You can have protein, carbs, and fats within all of your meals. And you can also create these things called performance plates. I've mentioned them in my Instagram stories before, and and performance plates are basically for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and even for snacks, a ratio of carbs to protein to fat and greens, making sure that you're getting in your vegetables, you're getting in your complex or simple carbohydrates, your protein, everything you need as a runner and as a human to perform the best that you can perform. Nutrition also falls under one of those categories that we can control. For some of you who've had race strategy calls with me before, we go through like what we can control on race day and what we can't control on race day. Nutrition is one of those things that 99% of the time we can control. Every now and again, I would say maybe the hydration piece is a part that's really gnarly on certain race days, depending on the weather and stuff. But nutrition is something we can control. So, like, let's dial that in now. And one of the best parts of training when you're training for a race is, and you'll hear me say this if you haven't already, is, for those long runs, like, we're not just training to dial in that goal marathon pace or that goal half marathon pace. We're also training our nutrition, our hydration, our outfit, our race shoes, like if we're carrying water, how that feels on our body, like we're doing all of that. And nutrition is such a big component to it. Um, so if you are, how much is enough, right? That's the biggest question. How much is enough? As an athlete and as a runner, if you're logging, considerable miles, you should be eating a lot of carbohydrates. And I think there's a big myth out there, or this idea that if we eat a lot of carbs, we're going to gain a lot of weight. Well, if we're running really, nice mileage, that's not necessarily the case. We're actually burning through all of it, and our body needs those carbohydrates for energy. So, if you are going through a heavier training cycle, having your performance plate, if you're thinking of it like a pie chart, having half of your plate be on the carbohydrate side. And what does that look like? That could be rice, sweet potatoes, grains, breads. Fruit is a really great carbohydrate. Apples, bananas, berries, anything like that. And then dividing the rest of your plate, so you only have 50% left, into proteins and grains. Um, if you're in a rest period, if you are in, maybe you're injured, or maybe you're just taking a little bit of a break in training. So you're just running some easy miles, not logging a lot. After the Boston Marathon, I think everyone knows this because I was very vocal about it. I wasn't running a whole lot, and it was driving me insane. Like, all I wanted to do was run. And I was maybe running about 20, 25 miles a week, which isn't a lot, and isn't a lot for me, but just I needed to also work on recalibrating what I was eating, because I was used to eating what I was training for during training, which was, 65, 68 miles a week. And then dropping down to 20, 25 is a really big drop, right? So adjusting as you go through your training is also a really big component to it. And that also means as you build up. So for Mike's building up, and he's running more and more and more. Most weeks, we're going to have a cutback week next week. We are, Mike. And, but that's okay. And then as Mike builds up those miles, he'll be eating more and more to make sure that his body's feeling fueled, it's feeling good, it's feeling strong to get through not just the easy runs, but the workouts and the long runs. So if you are, no matter if you're running easy, running a workout, running a long run, you also want to make sure that you're kind of hugging that workout or that run with a lot of nutrition. So if you're running in the morning, eating before you go out for a run. And what does that look like? That could be a banana, a piece of toast with nut butter. So peanut butter, almond butter, banana. If you're doing a long workout, maybe bringing a gel with you. Spring Energy is my preferred choice of gel. I think everyone on this call knows that. And it's natural food. It's really great. And it just sets you up for success. I haven't had any stomach issues with Spring Energy, so that's been really great. And I know a lot of people who have also tried it have had really great results with it. I also have a promo code for all of my athletes that I'll share with you at the end of this. At the end of this call, and as an Elevate athlete, you get 10% off Spring Energy, which is amazing. But you also, so you want to be fueling while you're doing your workout if it's a longer workout, and then also making sure that you're eating 30 to 45 minutes after your workout. So if you're traveling for a long run, Mike was part of this during the summer for a little bit. We were driving all over the Denver Boulder area for our long runs. I would bring food with me to make sure that I was eating enough or having enough calories at maybe as a snack to hold me over until I got home. So what does that look like? It looks like having protein and carbs. So I would do sometimes like a protein shake with water, which isn't great, but I would pair it with like a piece of fruit or an RX bar. Sometimes I'd bring like a little cooler and I would have like some yogurt, some granola, some fresh fruit, things like that. So you want to make sure that you have, after your long runs, protein and carbs. Let's say you're an evening runner, making sure that before you get out for your long run or your run in the evening, that you're eating something before. Again, it can be a banana, it can be a piece of toast. You want to do the simple carbohydrates that will digest quickly through your system. So when you're out there, you're not having stomach problems or GI issues. And it's also something that you get to play around with because everyone's different. Some people can run after eating a full meal and feel incredible, while others have to be really careful about what they eat before they go out for an evening run. And maybe that's why I like morning running so much, because it's just easier on my stomach. But making sure you have something in your stomach before you go out, you'll see and notice and feel a difference. I guarantee it. I was running fasted all the time until I couldn't really run any longer. And I started eating a banana, and then I started eating a piece of toast with a banana. And now I'm up to like oatmeal and a banana, usually before I go out for like a workout or a long run. And it makes such a big difference. So you can start out if you're not eating right now before you go out for a run. Start with something small. Start with a banana. It might be like 15 to 20 grams of carbohydrates and work your way up. Ideally, for an easy run that's under 60 minutes, I think a banana is fine. Anything longer than that, work your way up from the 15 to 20 grams of carbs into the 30, the 35, maybe the 40, depending if you're marathon training and you're going out for a 20-mile long run, maybe bumping that up to 60. You get to play around with it as an athlete to figure out what works for you, what works for your body, what works for your stomach, to set you up for success so you feel good on that run. Does anyone have any questions about fueling either before or after your runs, whether it's easy or you have a workout, long run?
Hey, I think the part that I find difficult sometimes is to know how much. And I know there are some guidelines on a per kilo basis or based on your weight. Do you have a rough guesstimate on it, especially post workout carb intake and or protein intake? Any suggestions on how much?
Yeah, definitely. If it's a workout that's over 60 minutes, like I would love to see about 30 grams of protein. I think that's a really nice number to get to. It's something I struggle with. But 30 grams of protein after is amazing. And let me back up. If it's your meal after a workout, 30 grams of protein, maybe up to 60 grams of carbohydrates, I think that's great. If it's a snack to bridge you, like when I was driving, all over the Denver metro area for my long runs this summer, I would use it as a snack, what I was eating after my run, to bridge the gap until I got home to like make an actual meal. So then I would reduce that a little bit. So it might have been like 20 grams of protein, 30 to 40 grams of carbs, but then just making sure you're refueling when you get home. And when you do it the right way, and you get to play around with it too a little bit, but when you do it the right way, you're going to know because you're going to have energy for most of the day. Like, yeah, you might get that 4 p.m. slump that Mike and I were talking about, but you're not going to be destroyed for the rest of your day, which sometimes that happens, right? Like sometimes you just feel completely annihilated by that run. So play around with it a little bit, but I also will add some notes into your long run too, just to make sure like you have that dialed in and you kind of know the guidelines in case you forget. But that's a great question. Any other questions?
If you're eating before a long run, how much time do you give yourself to digest before you go out for that long run?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends. That's my favorite answer. It depends. So everyone's different, right? Everyone's stomach is different, but generally, if you're going out for a shorter long run and you're just eating maybe a banana, you could do that up to an hour before. If you're going to have a piece of toast with nut butter and a banana, maybe 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours, depending on how sensitive your stomach is. If it's 3 hours before a long run, you could definitely do like oatmeal, banana, a little bit of nut butter. You just want to be cautious about having too much fat before you run because it can cause GI issues. But you also get to know your body. Like I can eat a bowl of banana, or I can eat a bowl of oatmeal with the banana like an hour before my long run and be fine in the morning. But I know at night I can't do that. It has to be about 3 hours before. So you get to practice that in your training, but those are very general guidelines. And if you know that something works and it works well and you've had success with it, keep doing that. Bagels are another great option, or English muffins. because they digest pretty easily too in the morning. So fruit, bread, that's great. And then oatmeal if you have a little bit of a longer window before you start running, because that will take a little bit longer to digest. Thanks, Mike. Great question. Awesome. Well, we're going to get into like recovery days. So I mentioned this earlier. Recovery days, if you're in a heavy training cycle, you still want to eat a healthy number of calories, healthy number of carbs, because I want you to think of it as your body's recovering from yesterday and it gets to prep and fuel for tomorrow. So if let's say your rest day is on Sunday and you decide like, oh, I'm just, not going to eat a whole lot today because I'm not working out. Maybe you're going to sit on the couch, watch football, not be active. It's actually going to hurt your run tomorrow and set you up so your body isn't recovered from maybe yesterday's long run. So still fueling as best as you can on those like active recovery days or recovery days when you're in a heavy training cycle is really ideal. If you're in a point in your life or a season in your training, like you ran a race and now you have about a month of just really low miles, then you can start to kind of play around with the carbohydrates and like maybe not needing as much as you normally would if you're running a considerable number of more miles. You can just add more greens into your diet, focus in on about the same amount of protein, but just kind of flipping maybe 50% of carbs go down to like 25, and then just adding more of like the greens and the vegetables to kind of make up for that. But also you get to dial into your body and feel what is right for you. And if you're hungry, eat. That is my biggest point today. Like if you're hungry, definitely eat, because your body's telling you something. You're working really, really hard. And one of the best ways to run a really strong race is to fuel your body and to not starve. All right. So we talked about before, we talked about after. Let's talk about during. So gels are a big way to incorporate, getting calories into your body while you're running. I love the Spring Energy gels. When I'm on a long run, will, depending on the day and depending how many miles I ran that week and like just how much time was between my breakfast and when we actually started the long run, I'll start eating gels or consuming calories at the 60 to 90-minute window. But again, everyone's different. If I have all easy miles in my long run, I know I don't eat as much or consume as many calories. But if I have goal marathon pace work, if I have 2x3 miles or 2x5 miles or goal half marathon pace work, then I'm definitely eating a little bit more and trying to eat those gels when I'm running the faster miles to train my stomach on how it's going to feel on race day, because it's a little bit different. I don't know if anyone's experienced that. When you're running easy and consuming gels, sometimes your stomach is totally fine, and then you consume that same gel running quite a bit faster and your stomach's not okay. So making sure when you're going through the training process that you consume nutrition on the easy parts and during like the really tough fast running, to make sure that you're dialed in so you don't get a surprise on race day. So after that initial gel, again, it's anywhere between that 30 to 45-minute window where I'll start to take another. And I'll carry, enough gels with me to get me through whatever long run I have. Another piece of advice is carrying, once you get towards your longer long runs, whatever distance that is carrying enough gels with you that you're going to be taking on the course. It's something I did this summer with Boston. I don't know, Mike, if you saw me, there were definitely like 3 long runs where I was carrying about 8 gels in my pocket. And yeah.
I saw them all lined up. It's like, whoa.
I know. And it was a great way to practice what it would feel like on the course for Boston. And I found out too that if I needed to go to the bathroom during the race, that all my gels were going to fall out of my pocket. So to be prepared for that. So it's little things like that that you don't necessarily think about when you're in the midst of training and then something happens. And, I used a porta potty on a long run and all my gels like fell out of my pockets. So just being, aware of little things like that, so you're best prepared as possible on race day. And finding gels that work for you. Like I love the Spring Energy. I've had athletes use sweet potatoes. Dried fruit is a really great strategy if you want to go more on the healthier side. But Spring Energy is all natural food, so that's really great. I know Erin uses the Goo product and she really likes that. So just finding what works for you and setting yourself up for success. The other thing that you can do is also adding electrolyte mix to your waters. That usually will have like some nutrition component where you're getting calories, you're getting carbs, you're getting electrolytes at the same time. Tailwind is awesome. They have I think it's called like a naked flavor, and it's essentially like just powder that you're putting in your water. You can't taste it. It tastes like water, but you're getting in calories, you're getting in carbohydrates, and you're getting in electrolytes all at the same time. So it's awesome for summer running, especially, or, just warm weather running, depending on what part of the country you're in. And that's another great way to kind of manage your nutrition intake as well. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Well, I've since my long run right now is only about 11, I have to be honest, I haven't really been fueling. Although, I mean, at some point, I will start doing that just to practice it. And I know that as my long runs get longer, I'll definitely start fueling more.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say probably in a few weeks when you start getting closer to that like 13-mile mark. And something else we can try too, Mike, and I suggest this for anyone racing, something I do is I'll take a gel within 5 minutes of the start time of the race. So I eat my pre-race breakfast. Most races start early. For Boston, I had to do something a little bit different where I ate breakfast and then I brought a honey stinger waffle and a banana on the bus to eat before running, and then taking a gel right before I started. But like for Houston, for example, eating our breakfast, taking a gel right before we start, and then practicing. Mike, for you, if you're running a 13, 14, maybe we can get up to 15 for that half marathon training. Taking a gel at that 6-mile mark or 6.5-mile mark, and then seeing how you're doing throughout the rest of the run. You might need to take another one after that, but just thinking through like the actual race piece of it, taking one right before, taking one right in the middle might be enough to get you all the way through. I also love, on the whole other side of the spectrum, the Jelly Belly sports beans. So it's basically candy, and they have the caffeine version, and then they have regular just jelly beans, but they have electrolytes in them. And so sometimes I'll take those with me to race, and then I'll, like for a half marathon, for example, take a gel halfway through, and then maybe I'll take like half a bag of beans like at mile 10 just to get me through like the last 3 miles. So that's a strategy too. Or you could take another gel or take half a gel and throw the other half away, whatever you want to do. So you guys get to be creative with it. But if you have any questions about your personal nutrition intake and what's going to work for you, whether in training runs or long runs or races, we can also address that on our coaching calls. Any other questions? No? Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about, the last thing I'm going to talk about is where you believe your performance comes from and where it actually comes from. I think a lot of times as athletes, we believe our performance comes from the really fast shoes and the Strava kudos and pushing hard all the time and trying to get as many miles in as we can. I was sharing this with an athlete earlier today. In the middle of my Boston training, I was sharing with a friend. I was like, I feel amazing. I ran 67 miles this week, peak week. I feel great. I want to keep going. I want to keep running. And my friend said to me, don't be greedy. You're going is good right now. Like, trust the process, trust the plan. And that really hit home for me. And I think it's a really valuable tip where when we feel really good, we want to push the envelope and like do all the things and keep running. And I felt that way after Boston. I wanted to keep running. And my coach said, no, no. And that's exactly what I needed to hear. So making sure that, where you believe your performance comes from, it doesn't actually come from pushing too much where maybe you get injured, or how many Strava kudos you get, or having the best racing shoes, because as we all know, that doesn't always translate into a really great race. Like I had not a really bad, but I didn't have a great experience with my racing shoes at Boston. So, where does your performance actually come from? It comes from sleep, number one. So getting a healthy number of sleeping hours most nights if you can. And everyone's a little bit different too, but as you ramp up your training, you'll want to be sleeping a little bit more. But nutrition is also another component to that, and just making sure that you're eating enough calories, you're eating enough carbohydrates and protein so your body can perform and really crush the workouts that we want to crush, and it has time to recover and repair so you can go into the next day feeling really good, whether that's a recovery run or a long run or whatever that looks like. So hydration is another component to that. So that's kind of the trifecta. Drinking enough water every day. 100 ounces is what I recommend to anyone. For anyone living in Colorado, we could always bump that up a little bit. And then in the summer months, if you're like a heavy sweater, or you just live in a really, really warm, humid environment, you can bump that up a little bit more. So 110 to 115 ounces of water a day. And if you're only drinking like 50 to 60 ounces of water right now, don't just like increase like by 100% and like double your water intake. Like do it slowly so your body can adjust to it. And same is true when you're tapering and going into race mode. I've had athletes reach out the day before a race and they're saying, I'm drinking all the water. And I'm like, don't do that. Just stick to what you normally drink, because they're losing a lot of the electrolytes by increasing their water intake over the course of a day, like tenfold or whatever that looks like. So stick with what works, increase your water intake slowly. Once you get up to that 100 ounces of water a day, that's ideal. And that's what we're really going to strive for. And I'll leave it with that, unless we have any other questions. No? Great. Thank you for your time today. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out individually and we can schedule a quick call to kind of talk through your personal situation and what's going on with you. Mike, I'll see you in about 90 minutes. Sloan's Lake. And Aaron, Anchor, Jason, it was great to see you all. And for anyone watching this back on like playback, I hope you found this interesting. We can absolutely dive into more details in another session if there's more questions. So just let me know what your questions are. We can dive into more of that. And I hope you have a great rest of your night. Bye.
Take care. Thanks.
Yeah.